Welcome, Pewter Report readers, viewers, and listeners to a brand new edition of the Pewter Report podcast, energized by Celsius, the official energy drink of PewterReport.com. Happy Monday to everybody. Hope you all had a fantastic weekend as we move closer to training camp and, of course, the 4th of July coming up this week as well. But we got a fun one in store to kick off the week as we will be talking about if this is Baker Mayfield's best supporting cast. When we had minicamp a couple of weeks ago, Baker was asked if this is the most talented group that he had. He responded to it. But we're going to dig a little bit deeper when it comes to the talent that Baker Mayfield has worked with in the past and the group he will be working with this season. So a lot to get to. And, of course, any comments, questions, anything from the Pewter people as well, we will happy to get to, along with roll call coming up at 4:20. I'm your host, Matt Matera. Joined with me is my fellow colleague from PewterReport.com, Adam Lavonte is on the show. Adam, how we doing, man?
Matt, we're doing great. Happy to be on the show with you. You mentioned it's going to be a fun one, not just to kick off the week, but also the month of July and the month of training camp a couple weeks from now. Really excited to dive into this topic and how it kind of correlates with the beginning of training camp. There's plenty of weapons to talk about when looking at Baker Mayfield and kind of like the arsenal of weapons that he has. Scott Reynolds, he did a Pewter Pulse on it this past week, and I've kind of done a couple articles looking at just how this supporting cast compares to Baker Mayfield early in his career with the Browns and even last year with the Bucs, because you look at it from last year with the Bucs, the additions outweigh the subtractions going into this year when you look at the new weapons the team added in the draft, even in free agency. So really excited to kick off the show with you.
Yeah, you had two great articles. Putting them in the chat right now. It's a part one and part two of if this is Baker's best supporting cast. So obviously this is kind of the audio version of that article, and then you can go and read it as well on PewterReport.com. The part two one came out not too long ago. So, a couple 2-3 days ago. So, definitely make sure you check that out. And I think there's like multiple ways to kind of look at it too, because sure, you could just look at the stats and say, oh, well, Baker did what he did last year with the 28 touchdowns and the 4,000 yards and all that stuff. And, his, best season with the Browns was when they made the postseason a couple years ago. And to a degree, that's very, very true. But I think there's more to it than just saying, oh, well, he threw for 28 touchdowns. He has the most talented cast. There's a lot more factors that get into it. And I think there's like a fair argument as far as from a talent perspective, whether it was Baker and the Browns in kind of that 2019 range, especially when they first traded for Odell Beckham, or, last year's Bucs or even this year's Bucs. And the Rams fully healthy, I think that's another discussion as well. But when Baker went there, he, it wasn't the Super Bowl winning team that people thought. So, I think there's a lot of different ways to really break it down.
Yeah, for sure. And kind of like first looking at it, when you look at Baker Mayfield's Browns tenure, I think the 2020 season was kind of the blueprint for Baker Mayfield because the Browns had two really solid running backs in Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Together, they combined for, like, you almost don't see it in today's NFL. They combined for 400 carries, 1,900 yards, 18 touchdowns. Having that kind of backfield made it so much easier for Baker Mayfield to really distribute the football. In fact, he had 6 wide receivers or running backs that had over 20 receptions. So I feel like with a more improved running game this year, which is likely to happen, I mean, they can't finish dead last 3 years in a row. There has to be some improvement, especially with Liam Cohen kind of establishing the run in terms of offensive scheme. If it's even middle of the pack, and you look at the receivers and Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, perhaps being the two best wide receivers Baker Mayfield's ever had, Odell Beckham included, there's just so much room for this offense to really grow and thrive.
Yeah, and that was one of the big time benefits that Baker really had with the Browns is that, I mean, even to this day, the Browns running game is great, whether it's Nick Chubb or, the third string backup because Nick Chubb tore his ACL. So I think there's no argument in terms of best supporting cast. We can't say that, even though Rachaad White was very talented last year, we can't say that the Bucs running game is the best talent that that Baker Mayfield has been around. You can't come to a team that's dead last 2 years in a row and say, "Oh, well, Rachaad White's a superstar." No. Rachaad
Yeah.
White is great. I mean, if you want to argue Rachaad White's the best receiving running back that Baker Mayfield has ever had,
I don't
then we
think that's a
can sit
debate.
down, yeah, and have that discussion. But as far as the run game in of itself, if we were drafting this, which we're not, but if we were, I think I would definitely take Nick Chubb as the number one guy. It's so crazy too, thinking Baker coming into the league, like the Browns did not win a football game, and that's why they had the first overall pick
Yeah.
and were able to draft him. And people may forget Baker didn't start right away as a rookie in Cleveland. It was Tyrod Taylor that
Yep.
got the start, and then infamously, it was a Thursday night game where Tyrod Taylor got hurt. They were playing the Jets, and Taylor got hurt, but like he wasn't playing well either. So Baker came in, kind of sparked the comeback. He actually caught a touchdown pass as well, and then the team was really Baker's ever since. So that's a little bit of the timeline for how Baker really got his start with Cleveland back in the day.
And I think that's kind of an underrated aspect of how Baker Mayfield really started his career, because coming to a team that was 0-16, and then him being the backup the first couple of the games of the year, his rookie year, he still threw for 27 touchdown passes with a supporting cast really led by Jarvis Landry. And that was the rookie record for touchdown passes by a quarterback until it was broken a couple of years ago by Justin Herbert. But just Baker's ability to take a team that was just mired in dysfunction, 0-16 before that, like just years of perennial losing, and being able to turn that around. I think they won like 6 games with Baker his rookie year, and then kind of evolving into a playoff team a couple years beyond that. Like the Browns were in their best place probably with Baker Mayfield under center in 2019, 2020. And it could be argued that if he was on the Browns today with their elite defense and their cast of weapons, they would even be more successful than with Deshaun Watson. So just his ability to turn around an organization, I think, is just really underrated.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and it would be really interesting to dissect. I don't think we have to do it on this show because it's more of a hypothetical. But if Baker was the quarterback of this current Browns team, would it be more talented or better than this current Buccaneers team? Because I think there's like
Yeah.
an argument to be made that Baker on the current Browns, especially with that defense, I'm not really taking anything away from the Buccaneers defense, but that Browns defense is like unreal, especially with
Yeah.
Myles Garrett. Like if you put Myles Garrett on the Buccaneers defense, I'm taking the Bucs defense, but I
Right.
guess Myles Garrett is kind of that great equalizer. I think there is a case to be made that Baker on this current year's Browns would be better than the current Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. And it just kind of like I'm kind of reminded of the 2021 season when Baker, like in a contract year, he played through injury and really toughed it out after the 2020 season. And then the Browns just kind of
Yeah.
gave up on him for Deshaun Watson. It's kind of like a what if scenario if Baker stayed with the Browns and the Browns really like gave him a longer leash, because it doesn't seem like they gave him a fair shot after turning around the organization, leading them to the playoffs in the 2020 season. One bad year where he's injured,
Yeah.
and they just ship him to the Panthers. Like that part
Exactly.
still doesn't make sense to me.
Well, I mean, it shows why, and I know they've turned it around recently, but it shows why the Browns have been such a bad franchise for, really the last 2 decades, I guess, because even kind of like, again, going to the timeline of Baker's career, like he had Hugh Jackson for not even a whole season. He was fired, and then Greg Williams took over. Todd Haley was fired as well. Freddie Kitchens became the offensive coordinator. Then Kitchens gets the head coaching job in 2019. But then in 2020, Freddie Kitchens is gone after one season. And it's really difficult to have that continuity and to kind of build a sustainable winner when every year you're kind of bringing in a new regime and a new set of ways to, run an organization. That's what makes teams like the Steelers so formidable for a lot of years. Even the Bucs to a degree with, really just having Jason Light as the general manager for a very long time now. And, having Bruce Arians since 2019. And even though Bruce Arians stepped down, there was a plan in place. It wasn't like a complete changing on the guard. So, he had Stefanski for a year, and that's really, that's where he went 11-5, threw for 3,563 passing yards. And you finally get an offensive guy in there, and then you kind of give up on him one season later. It doesn't really kind of make sense in that aspect, because he was hurt for a little bit. I mean, I guess
Yeah.
the dangling carrot of having Deshaun Watson available, who was, I guess at the time, I mean, there's really no such thing as a sure thing unless it's, Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes. But
Yeah.
I wonder if it was more at the time they just knew that they could get Deshaun Watson, and it was, more of a, I guess, like, you had more confidence that he would be a better player than Baker did. I'm curious how that went down.
Yeah, and it's just really interesting because Watson, he didn't obviously play the year prior, and then the Browns make a big bet on him. He doesn't play for the first 11 games and just looks so rusty, and he just hasn't
Yeah.
really reclaimed that form. I wonder how much that really weighed into the consideration rather than just name recognition of, oh, it's Deshaun Watson. He led the league, I think, in passing the last full year he played with the Texans. Let's go get
Yeah.
him. Baker Mayfield? He led us to the promised land. That's as far as he'll take us. We'll ship him out. But kind of connecting it back to the 2024 Bucks, and it can be debated whether the 2020 Browns or the 2023 Buccaneers were the best supporting cast for Baker Mayfield. I think there's a fair
Yeah.
argument to make for both sides. When you look at 2020, the 1-2 punch of the running backs, I think, really helped. With you mentioned Kevin Stefanski, kind of that organizational stability was there in 2020. In
Mhm.
2023, Baker had two top wide receivers in Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. They've stuck around, but it wasn't always a guarantee that Todd Bowles and Dave Canales were going to finish out the year in Tampa Bay. I think that's kind of a forgotten point when the team was in the midst of the losing streak. So the edge probably goes to the 2020 Browns, but when you look at the 2024 Buccaneers, with all the parts remaining with Todd Bowles, Baker having some familiarity with Liam Cohen, and then all the weapons still in town, I think with that improved running game, the 2024 Bucks really, if all pieces are aligned, no injuries, I think this is the best supporting cast.
So I'm in agreement even before they hit the field that this Bucks team this year is better than the supporting cast and the offense that the Bucks had in 2023. I can't just sit here and assume that the running game is all of a sudden going to get better just because they drafted Bucky Irving and Grant Barton. I can't put that ahead of things that have already happened and things that we've seen in the past, specifically for the Browns in 2020, based on the idea that the Bucks are going to improve the running game. Because you know what? We said the same thing last year. The Bucks are going to get this running game off the ground.
Yeah.
It's going to, be in tip-top shape. Rashad White's going to rush for 1,000 yards. He's the full-time starter. It's much, much better for the Bucks this time around. And you know what? It didn't happen. It got a little bit better, and overall the offense was in a better situation. But I'm not going to make that mistake again, even though there's a lot to like about Liam Cohen. He's a way more experienced offensive coordinator than Dave Canales was a season ago. He still hasn't fully called plays at the NFL level. Yes, he's been an offensive coordinator at the NFL level, but there's being an offensive coordinator and there's also being a play caller.
Yeah.
So, if someone's going to ask me, do you think the run game will improve? Like, will it not be in last place? I'll say yes, but
Mhm.
how much of an improvement are we getting? Are the Bucks going from 32nd in the NFL to 28? Well, then I don't think there's really been that much of a significant improvement. Are the Bucks going from 32 to 15? Sign me up for that, because I don't even
Yeah.
think the Bucks need a good running game. They just need an okay to average running game to really let Baker, sling it with the weapons that he has at wide receiver.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, it doesn't need to go from last to first. It can just go from last to middle of the pack, and I think there's just such a marked improvement there. And I think what will help the Bucks run game this season is the fact that they don't need to rely on Rashad White to carry it
Yeah.
272 times again. E- with less touches, I think that White will be more efficient and having more breathers, like to go on the sidelines while Bucky Irving comes in for a down or two. And I think Bucky Irving really adds like some elusiveness and home run playability that the run game hasn't had. I mean, Rashad White last year, he was really a factor in the receiving game, but in terms of the run game, there was just so many games where it just didn't get going. He would run between the tackles, 2 yards a carry, 2 yards a carry. And it's like, that's not going anywhere. Like, in terms of being a successful running game, you need that balance. So I think Irving kind of adds some balance to the run game. And I see it being better than probably 28th. If it could just get to like 20th, 22nd,
Yeah.
I think that'll really help.
Yeah, it doesn't. It needs to get out of the exact basement. Like when I said
Yeah.
32 to 15, it doesn't have to be 15. I think, yeah, even if it gets around that 20 range, that's still moving up essentially 12 spots. That's a really, really good improvement for the Buccaneers. And I think what will be most important in improving that running game, yes, absolutely. Having Bucky Irving in there is big time. He's already getting a lot of hype from, and I know we complain, national media never pays attention to the Buccaneers. Well, a lot of people are paying attention to Bucky Irving.
Yeah.
And, that's good to see. People are saying he's going to be a fantasy football standout. People are saying he may take the starting role from Rashad White. I don't necessarily see that happening, especially in today's NFL, and especially, unfortunately, with the way that Todd Bowles is kind of slow to push the button in terms of we need to make a change personnel-wise at any position.
Yeah.
But, he does tend to trust his veterans, and it feels weird saying veteran in terms of Rashad White, who's only going into his third year. But as far as that running back room goes, outside of Chase Edmonds, he is the veteran in the room. But I think the biggest thing for improving this run game is obviously you need help from the offensive line.
Yeah.
But more specifically, it's limiting the amount of questions that you have about the offensive line. For example, Cody Mauch, yes, he's bigger. He looks fit for the role.
Yeah, like
But
an NFL guard.
We can't totally say he's going to be fantastic, terrific, and all that stuff. Graham Barton, same type of thing. First round pick, starting center. You think the problem's solved, but we can't totally dial in and plug it in and say, all right, Graham Barton's the guy. Now, after 3 or 4 games, those two answers may be solved. And then all the Bucs have to worry about is the left guard situation. If the Bucs can get to, let's just say, the first month, 2 months of the season, and really their only issue is the left guard, I think that's a good situation to be in for Tampa Bay in their running game, because you can still rely on the passing game. The running game does not have to be the number one overall go-getter, but just give something for Baker Mayfield. Because, again, going back to that 2020 season, you give Baker a run game, and he will run with it, no pun intended. So I think that's very, very important. And we have a super chat from Hammy Actual. Thank you for the $9.99 super chat. You know our rule, too. I know we're talking about Baker Mayfield and this current Bucs offense, but if you want to talk to us about the defense, I'm absolutely down for it. So you super chat us, you cut the line, we'll talk about whatever topic you want. So thank you to Hammy Actual for the super chat, who says, do you guys think if Lavonte played his entire career in Dallas or one of those large market teams, is he a Hall of Famer, first ballot? Also, Lavonte keeps his Super Bowl in this scenario. We got a question like this on Wednesday's show that me and Scott answered. So, Adam, I'll let you attack this one first, and then I'll give my opinion on it.
This is a really good question because it's something I've thought of, not just in football, but in baseball too. Like when you look at like guys that play for the Yankees or even the Mets, like bigger market teams, like their name is just out there so much more. All the headlines are like Aaron Judge hits a home run. And it's like, in terms of Lavonte David, if he played with a bigger market team, or at least a team that saw more success throughout his career. I mean, Lavonte didn't make the playoffs. What was it, like the first 8 years of his career? So if he was like on the Seahawks and like Bobby Wagner was, I feel like he would be a Hall of Famer because he would get all the Pro Bowl accolades. Although the Pro Bowl selections don't mean much, like if anything, when a player retires, that's all like the national media looks at. How many times did he make the Pro Bowl? How many times did he get an All-Pro selection? If he played for a bigger market team, he'd definitely have more than one, right? He'd at least have like 5 or 6 and really build up that resume. And I feel like to be a Hall of Famer, you need that resume. So if Lavonte played for a bigger market team, I definitely think he would be in Hall of Fame consideration.
I think there's no question he's a Hall of Famer, and you hit the nail on the head. I mean, he made a Pro Bowl or two and got an All Pro with the Bucs. If he's playing for that with that star on the helmet in Jerry World for the Dallas Cowboys and he's Super Bowl champion, you got to think he probably has at least 3 All Pros and probably 8 Pro Bowls or something like that just from playing from Dallas. And he has the Super Bowl. And the stats, like his stats are better than in some areas than Bobby Wagner. And of course, they would be ahead of Luke Kuechly because Luke Kuechly retired at a younger age. We saw this play out last Hall of Fame with DeMarcus Ware. Now, DeMarcus Ware played for 2 different teams and, kind of excelled at both and won a Super Bowl with the Broncos. But Simeon Rice has better numbers than DeMarcus Ware. However, DeMarcus Ware played for more popular teams. And because of that, and, the Super Bowl he won with the Broncos, Peyton Manning was his quarterback. So naturally that team got more attention than Simeon Rice and Brad Johnson as their starting quarterback.
Fair.
So I think without question, Lavonte David would be a Hall of Famer if he was on the Dallas Cowboys. I think really the difficult part to answer is he a first ballot Hall of Famer with the Cowboys? That I'm going to say no, but I think he gets in not long after, like probably the second year of eligibility, maybe the third year of eligibility. I don't think he waits very long, but I don't necessarily know if he would be a first ballot Hall of Famer.
Yeah, that's true. And kind of looking at it, though, it's an interesting what if, because if he played for the Dallas Cowboys his whole career, would he be seen as kind of like that Ray Lewis, like that transcending inside linebacker, one of the best ever? If every season it's 150 tackles, couple interceptions, like just being a menace for another team, a bigger market. They're like, I don't know. That's a great question.
It's a really good question. Appreciate it. And thanks for the super chat once again. Maybe something we'll break down further at another time, talking about, the future, hopefully Hall of Famer, Lavonte David. But we do have to turn our attention to something else, something just as fun that we do around 4:20 every single Monday, unless we're talking about Lavonte David, then we're happy to push that time back a little bit. But it's time for Roll Call. We do this every Monday show. We want to know where you at, Pewter people, because we love interacting with all our fans as much as we possibly can, especially because our fans are all over the globe, not just in Tampa or the state of Florida. You can find Pewter people, Bucs fans, Pewter Report fans, all across this beautiful world that we live in. So I'm going to start talking about the Buccaneers, specific topic today. And in the meantime, Adam will put on the screen where you guys are watching the show from, starting with Chris in Citrus County, Florida. Excuse me. So what I want to talk about today, it's a little bit of a rough day for Tampa Bay fans. And that's because presumably, if you're a Bucs fan, you're probably a fan of the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. And unfortunately, well, they did get Jake Gensel, and I'm personally a big Jake Gensel fan. But the other news that is affecting a lot more Tampa Bay fans at the moment is that Steven Stamkos is no longer with the Lightning after 16 years. The captain of the team won 2 Stanley Cups, went to 4 Stanley Cup finals. I don't know where he is like in the all-time goals and points, but he's certainly up there. Anyway, he signs a 4-year deal with the Nashville Predators. After 16 seasons with the Lightning, he goes to the Nashville Predators and will probably finish his career there. Bit of a tough pill to swallow for the Lightning, especially given that they just made that trade with Sergachev to kind of open up some more room. And it doesn't get done, and a lot of people are unhappy. And it just kind of made me think, because in today's sports world, and you're seeing it with the NBA right now, like Klay Thompson just signed with the Dallas Mavericks, it is so difficult, and it's really no one's fault. I know a lot of people are mad at the Lightning GM, and understandably so, but it's very tough in today's sports landscape, the sports world, for one player to stay with one team, the team that either drafted them or traded for them on draft night, to stay with their original team for their whole career. It's very few and far between. I mean, Think of the greatest of all time in every sport. Michael
Yeah.
Jordan, Bulls and the Wizards. LeBron played for a couple of teams. Tom Brady obviously wasn't just a Patriot. He was a Super Bowl winner with the Bucs as well. And, Wayne Gretzky obviously played for several teams. So that just shows how difficult it is for one star to stay with one team um, for its entirety of their career. And I bring up the teams like the Patriots, where Tom Brady and Gronk, probably their two most popular players, didn't just play with the Patriots. The Cowboys, when they had the dynasty with Aikman and Michael Irving, yeah, they stayed with the Cowboys. But Emmitt Smith was probably the best player out of the three of them, and Emmitt Smith went to the Cardinals.
Yep.
The Steelers have won a ton of Super Bowls. James Harrison was a guy that you would think he's an all-time Steeler. Well, he also played for the Bengals and a couple of other teams. It's so tough to have a star player that you picked, that you drafted, to stay with your team for their whole career. And for the Bucs, they've been really lucky. They've been able to do this for a good portion of their franchise history. Derek Brooks, Rondé Barber, Mike Allstott, three guys that spent their whole career with the Buccaneers. Rondé Barber's in the Hall of Fame. Derek Brooks is in the Hall of Fame. Mike Allstott is in the Buccaneers Hall of Fame and is beloved by everybody for the way that he ran over defenders. And now you look at the current day Buccaneers, and nothing's really set in stone until there's officially a retirement. But it doesn't really look like Lavonte David's going anywhere. He's only going to be a Buccaneer. Mike Evans just signed that new contract with the Bucs. Odds are he's going to be a Buck for life. I mean, that was the Bucs slogan. That was Mike Evans' slogan. It's just really cool to see, and I think the Bucs should consider themselves lucky that they've had some big-time names in their organization be Bucs for life, be players that were drafted by this team, or signed on with this team, and have only played for the Buccaneers. Historic franchises all over have not been able to do that. The Lakers, arguably the most historic franchise in NBA history. Yes, Kobe was a Laker for his whole career, and Magic, but Shaq wasn't. Kareem wasn't. Obviously, LeBron wasn't. The Celtics, too. Like Paul Pierce wasn't a Celtic for his whole career. None of the big three with any of them. We'll see with this current team. But like I said, Brady and Gronk, too. Even like Joe Namath. Everyone thinks of him as the Jets. Like he also played for the Rams and things like that. I think everyone understands the point I'm trying to make. It's very rare that you see it in today's sports landscape. Yeah, as Chris Roxentine says, Joe Montana finished with the Chiefs. I know it's really difficult right now with Steven Stamkos and what went on, but try to appreciate some of the other guys that have been with their Tampa Bay teams for their whole career, and everyone can still enjoy when Stamkos gets his jersey retired by the Bucs, by the Lightning in a couple of years.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head, and I really like how you connected that from Steven Stamkos to kind of talking about like some of the Buccaneers and just how hard it is across the professional sports landscape to see players with one team their whole career. And like you mentioned, a lot of the quarterbacks, like the greatest ever, Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers. Like you think of players with just one team, but towards the end of the career, for one reason or another, other teams maybe pay for the name rather than the production. And it's really sad to see with Stamkos, but at the same time, like the Lightning also have to navigate the future. And I believe the guy that they got's in his mid-20s compared to Stamkos being in his 30s now. It's hard to like balance that emotion with the production that you're maybe going to see out of those players. And kind of connecting that back to the Buccaneers, Lavonte David and Mike Evans are still like two of the best players at their respective positions, even though they're entering like their early mid-30s. So I think just overall, it's really hard, especially in other sports like hockey, the NBA. It seems like every single year, superstars are on different teams. So for the Buccaneers, there's just so many players that have been Buccaneers for life that fans should really appreciate.
It's really, really hard to do. And if it's not a sure thing for Tom Brady, I don't think it could be a sure thing for anybody. Like right now, people would say you're crazy if you think Patrick Mahomes is going to play for anyone else besides the Chiefs. But if Tom Brady could be expendable to the Patriots and come to the Bucs, who knows? It could turn out that Patrick Mahomes ends up playing for another team late in his career. obviously right now that sounds kind of crazy, but you never know. I'm glad you brought up, the fact that Mike and Lavonte have been doing it so well for so long. Because look at Odell Beckham and look at Mike Evans. Like, they've been in the league almost the same amount of time. And yeah, Odell probably burst on the scene a little bit quicker, especially because he played for the Giants. And, Mike was with the Bucs and still is. But their career trajectories, I mean, Odell's on his last legs. And yeah, he had torn ACL, and that plays a lot into it. But Odell's probably done after this season. And he's only signing 1-year contracts now because that's the only way teams will even commit to him. Mike just got a brand new contract with a lot of money and still has high expectations, where Odell on the Dolphins is just kind of like,
yeah,
all right, yeah, thumbs up. Maybe you'll do something for us this year, but it's not really expected. Like he was, the fourth option on the Ravens last year? It's so interesting, and injuries play a part, and Mike obviously takes care of his body a ton. But two guys that were kind of the face of their teams, obviously, been in the league for a long time, and one guy's still going, still chugging along greatly, and it seems like it's kind of the last stop for Odell Beckham.
Yeah, and kind of like the point you mentioned before with like the super chat with Lavonte David, if Odell Beckham did that with a smaller market team and maybe not the Giants, is he still like in the NFL getting these chances every year? I mean, he hasn't
Yeah.
had over 500 receiving yards, I think, going back to his time with the Browns. So it's interesting looking at the Buccaneers, and it's like, do they just really appreciate their homegrown talent and why they've continued to keep them around and pay them? Because it seems like so many other teams just brush aside the contributions of players, while the Buccaneers, like, they've continued to show like trust and faith that these guys will continue to be impactful.
Yeah, it's very, very true. And then someone also spoke about Winfield and Wirfs. And again, you want them to be Bucks for life. The way that they're playing, you kind of expect them to be a Buck forever, but you just don't know.
Yeah.
Some people kind of get tired of staying in the same place and they want to try somewhere else. Or, if the Bucks aren't winning by the time Winfield's new contract is done, who knows if he's going to want to stay. Now, if they are winning and they're fantastic, then odds are they will. Or maybe they're winning so much that, I don't think there's really a world where a left tackle is like expendable and they're not going to pay Tristan Wirfs. But I don't know, if Winfield becomes more injury prone as he gets older, maybe the Bucks feel like they can kind of move on. These are all
Yeah.
hypotheticals and scenarios that hopefully never happen and they just stay with the Bucks. But it's just not. There's really not many guarantees. There's no guarantees for really any of these players. That's why you got to enjoy the moment when you're in it. Regardless of really what it is. Just like how I always enjoy the moment when I am drinking a Celsius energy drink, the official energy drink of pewterreport.com and the Pewter Report podcast. There's so many awesome flavors of Celsius, including their Vibe flavors, which consist of the Galaxy, Cosmic, and Astro. You can also go with the Tropical. The Arctic Vibe is my personal favorite. So tons of great flavors. There's no sugar. It's gluten-free. It's a great substitute for coffee in the morning if you're trying to switch things up a little bit. And of course, get a lot more variety with with the different flavors of Celsius. So if you need to know where to find a Celsius energy drink, go to the Celsius store locator on their website, punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest location where you can pick one up. Could be a Walmart, a health and fitness store, 7-Eleven, or it could be your bodega.
Bodega.
And once you keep once you keep going to your bodega and you love Celsius and you want more, you can buy the variety pack. Because variety is the spice of life, so many awesome flavors. Might as well try them all. Catch them all in Pokemon. Try them all when it comes to Celsius. So go to that store locator, punch in your address, and it'll tell you the closest geographical location where you can pick one up. And yeah, go to Amazon, subscribe and save, have it sent to your place of residence if you don't want to pick it up anymore. And just make sure you drink it Celsius, the official energy drink of the Pewter Report podcast. I keep thinking about that 2019 season when Odell Beckham first got traded to the Browns, and everyone was like, oh my God, the Browns are a juggernaut. Yeah. They got Jarvis Landry. They got Odell Beckham. They're great friends. They were teammates on LSU. This is going to be so much better. And man, it just did not work out between the two of them and Baker. Really more Odell, because Jarvis Landry stayed on the Browns for a couple of years. I think he even outlasted Baker,
Yeah.
from the time that they were both there together and by the time that they left. But kind of crazy that 2019 was so bad, but then 2020 became so good for Baker and the Browns. And Odell wasn't really a big part of that 2020 season because he tore his ACL and I believe only played in like 7 games that year or whatever it was.
Yeah, I think he did tear his ACL in week 7. But just kind of looking at it, like the Browns had the right idea, right? To go get that star wide receiver, form that 1-2 with Jarvis Landry. But Odell was just kind of the wrong number 1 wide receiver. Him and Mayfield just never really built that connection like you saw Mayfield build with Mike Evans last year. It seemed like right away Evans and Mayfield like just hit it off, and Baker had no problem throwing it up to him. And Evans had a Baker's dozen 13 touchdowns. So the results kind of
Yeah.
spoke for themselves in that regard. But with Odell Beckham, he was that star wide receiver with the Giants. Probably was off to like the best start of any wide receiver. Maybe Justin Jefferson now has an argument, but it just didn't click. And it's just such a what if. Because if the Browns really got that wide receiver that connected with Mayfield, maybe in an alternate universe, Mayfield still is on the Browns. He got that big contract. In 2020, maybe they did take it all the way because the Browns in 2020 had the blueprint. They had Odell and Jarvis. They had
Yeah.
Chubb and Hunt, an elite offensive line. As you mentioned before in talking about the Bucs offensive line, Baker throughout his time with the Browns always had a Pro Bowl offensive lineman. Joel
Yeah.
Bitonio, one of the best guards in football. J.C. Treader, Wyatt Teller, Jack Conklin. He always kind of had those guys up front. And looking at it now with the Bucs, I see the offensive line as being more solidified. I think the guys in their posts with Wirfs, Gedeke, and Mauk not having to switch sides this year, you just really want to see Graham Barton hit the ground running and the left
Yeah.
guard position being maybe just slightly more than a Band-Aid. But connecting it all back, I think it just a what if for Odell, because if Odell was just more for Baker, like those two really could have been a potent duo for years to come.
And that's why it shows how important chemistry is. Because they're both talented guys. Obviously, Odell in his prime, and he was at that point, an extremely talented wide receiver. But when you have two guys that just don't kind of mesh together, it could be detrimental to the team. This isn't the best example, but you think of like the Eagles and Donovan McNabb and T.O., they were always screaming at each other. And they did go to the Super Bowl that first year with T.O., but he didn't last that much longer with the team because it just didn't work out. And you need that between your quarterback and wide receiver probably more than really any other two positions communicating with each other. And I think it kind of stands out when whether it's Todd Bowles or Jason Light, when they talk about Baker, they say he's an offensive lineman with a quarterback's arm or whatever they say. He's got an
Yeah.
offensive lineman mentality who plays the quarterback position. I wonder, because of kind of what you were just talking about with Baker always having a great offensive lineman that's made a Pro Bowl or is all pro. I wonder because he had that in Cleveland so much, and we could talk about his time with the Panthers and the Rams momentarily, but because he had that with the Browns for such a long time, I wonder if that's why he kind of was able to hit it off so well with the linemen here with the Buccaneers
Yeah.
so quickly. Because remember, last year before the start of the season, like they all went on vacation together. I can't remember if it was like Bermuda, it was some tropical island.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, I mean, that's great for chemistry and that's awesome. And I hope they had the best time ever. I'm also thinking Baker's only been there for a month or two. It's kind of tough, not tough, but I don't know. Like you've only known these people for a month, and now you're like, hey, let's go on a vacation together with our significant others, and we're all gonna get away for a little bit. Like that takes quick bonding. That takes a friendship to escalate positively almost right away. And I wonder if because he relied so much on those offensive linemen in Cleveland, especially when things were going in opposite directions with the star wide receiver over there, that it made it easy for him to get along with Wirfs and Gedeke and those guys when he came to Tampa.
That's really interesting to consider. And I'd argue, like, yeah, I mean, when you look at the bond that him and Tristan Wirfs have formed, it's really become like that stepbrothers like kind of bond. And like during the
Yeah.
Pro Bowl week, those guys like riding roller coasters together, like they're the best of friends. And it just seems like at every stop with Baker having those quality offensive linemen, he kind of really gravitated towards Tristan and some of the other guys there.
No question about it. So, as we kind of wrap up Baker's time with the Browns, he plays through that partially torn labrum, and of course, that's always been kind of the positive and negative of Baker. He's tough as nails. He'll play through anything. He wants to play for his guys. But when he's super injured and probably should sit out, it hurt him both literally and physically, and it cost him his time for to be the starter of the Cleveland Browns. So he ends up getting released and signing with the Panthers. Did not work out with the Panthers, but at the same time, not the best cast of characters either.
Yeah, so just one more point on Baker's 2021 with the Browns. He really didn't have a lot of weapons to work with Odell being released partially like through that season. And then Jarvis Landry, he was a leading wide receiver. He only had like 50 receptions for just over 500 yards, and everybody
Yeah.
else was worse than that. Like, so Baker really didn't get a fair shake in 2021. But going into 2022, the Panthers' plan, they were after, like Teddy Bridgewater left. It was Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield that they brought in. They
Same
just
draft
weren't
class, yeah.
Yeah, same draft class, same top picks, but they weren't really committed to either. And it wasn't really a good situation for him in the fact that his head coach got fired 5 games in. The interim head coach benched him for PJ Walker. So they never really were committed to him. It was an organization just mired in instability that maybe is just starting to get on the right track. And then he gets a brief cup of coffee with the Rams. And what was interesting with the Rams is they were just kind of limping towards the end of the season, and they just needed a quarterback to kind of fill in. Cooper Kupp, Matthew Stafford. I think Aaron Donald might have even got injured too, but it wasn't really a good situation there. And he just had to find a way to put himself back on the map, which he did with the Bucs.
Speaking of finding a way, everybody, I recommend try to find a way to get onto this Tampa Bay Buccaneers cruise coming up in March.
It's a good.
I couldn't do it without Captain right here.
There ain't nothing like this right here. Got me seeing things crystal clear. So high, I can fight them all. It's gonna feel. There's a fire underneath my feet. Got me rolling like a river deep. Let it flow, cause I know that my soul's in the field.
Join the fun with hundreds of Bucs fans on the 3rd annual Tampa Bay Bucs cruise, which sets sail on March 7th through the 10th in 2025 on the beautiful Celebrity Silhouette ship. There's a 3-night cruise that begins in Fort Lauderdale and visits Key West and Bimini in the Bahamas. Last year's cruise had Yaya Diaby, Rashad White, Christian Izzy and Luke Gedeke, Kate Otten, Greg Gaines, Jamel Dean, who you saw in that video, Super Bowl 37 MVP Dexter Jackson, Hall of Famer Warren Sapp, Gene Deckerhoff, and many others. Even more players are expected next year as well, and there's going to be a guest appearance by Derek Brooks. There will be photo and autograph opportunities with players, raise the flag, sail away party, VIP parties with the players, special player interviews, a water volleyball challenge, Bucs trivia contest, fun games, and more. Reserve your cabin now on the 2025 Tampa Bay Bucs cruise, where drinks, including alcohol, Wi-Fi, and tips are all included with a $200 deposit per person, and that's refundable until August 16th. So visit TampaBayBucsCruise.com or call 1-800-975-7112 to book your trip. That's Tampa Bay Bucscruise.com, or call 1-800-975-7112. One thing we have not talked about yet that I want to get to, but we also do have a super chat from Meets McGee. Thank you, Meets McGee, for the $2 super chat, who says, cheers to the Pewter Report crew, just showing love. Appreciate that,
Thank you.
Meets McGee.
Appreciate
We
that.
love you too. Thank you so much for the kind words. But Adam, kind of going back to, I know we wrapped it up on the Browns, but I think the Browns from the tight end position probably had the best duo or players that that Baker Mayfield got to work with, especially with Njoku. Who was the other one that signed with them?
Austin Hooper?
Yes, Austin Hooper as well. The Rams, you could make a case with Higbee, but he was only there for so little. It's like, Njoku for seasons and Hooper versus Higbee for like 3 or 4 games.
Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that the Browns were probably his best tight end supporting cast.
Yeah, I would definitely agree. And it was something that kind of really intrigued me when I was doing research of like just Mayfield's connections with different players. Because in 2020, between Austin Hooper, David Njoku, and Harrison Bryant, they combined for like 89 receptions, almost 900 yards. So Baker really had a lot of success finding his tight ends. And what intrigues me most kind of going into 2024 is, so with Kate Otten and Payne Durham, having Liam Cohen as offensive coordinator, it's kind of intriguing because when Mayfield was with the Rams, Tyler Higbee had 108 targets, like the most targets of anybody, and 72 receptions, which was second on the team.
Yeah.
So he knows how to use a tight end. Baker knows how to throw to a tight end. What does that equate to? So then you look at Kate Otten in the playoffs, really started to come on, was the team's leading receiver, had a big first game against the Eagles, had a touchdown against the Lions. If he can kind of continue that, maybe he doesn't have to be the second or third option, but if he can just be a really consistent fourth option in this offense, he might have his best season yet. And then you have a starting tight end, and then maybe finding ways to get Payne Durham involved with somebody greater than 6 feet who isn't Mike Evans to throw the ball to in the end zone. So I think with the tight end position, there's a lot of promise there and optimism.
Yeah, Payne Durham, I think, is the candidate for a lot of people of like who's going to take the biggest step forward, who's going to make an impact that, hasn't before. I think a lot of people have their eye on Payne Durham for good reasons as well. And Kate Otten is certainly trending in the right direction with the big games that he had. And that's so important for the Buccaneers because they don't need him to do that consistently because of Mike and Chris and the running backs and everything like that. But it is important to know that he's capable of it. He has that in him because there will be a game this year where, the opponent is bracketing Mike and Mike's not going to be able to get the ball. And, maybe they just have some good coverages or the pass rush is working that day. And Chris Godwin isn't having a monster game that you would think would happen when Mike Evans is getting double teamed and bracketed and all that stuff. Well, who else is going to step up?
Yeah.
It kind of goes back to what made the Bucs so great in 2020 and more specifically 2021 is that you could take out Mike for a little bit. You can even take away Chris Godwin, but you're not going to be able to take away the two of them, Antonio Brown and Rob Gronkowski. And, by the way, Leonard Fournette, Lombardi Lenny, all that good stuff. So I'm obviously not comparing this current Bucs team with, the Antonio Browns and Gronks and that talented lineup. But there is enough to like about this team where if Kate Otten takes a step forward, if Rachaad White continues to be an all-purpose running back, you're going to see a lot more teams shy off from doubling Mike every single time because you have to account for everybody. And Kate Otten, I think, could play a huge role in that. And, Payne Durham, granted, it's OTAs. Like, he was making touchdown catches in the red zone, and that's exactly what we all want to see. Will it happen during training camp? We all hope so. He's off to a good start, and, Otten, very curious for him as well because he's going to be playing less, but less will be more for Kate Otten in this situation.
Yeah, so less will be more for Kate Otten and then also Rashad White. So just kind of both of them being able to benefit from maybe less touches, but bigger opportunities, I think will be crucial. And I really like the point that you made in that like opposing defenses may have more of a dilemma containing all the Bucks playmakers
Yeah.
heading into next season. Because you mentioned if they bracket Mike, bracket Chris, other guys are going to get opportunities. But at the same time, if the Bucks have four different players who could really make big plays, defenses have to account for it. And then it gets to the point you can't double everybody. They have to be in single coverage. And that's what made the Bucks offense in 2020 and 2021 like so potent, so high scoring, just
Yeah.
because Mike Evans is on one side, Antonio Brown's in the slot, they're running five wide. What are their defenses going to do? So you might see a little bit more of that this season, which will be really interesting because Baker Mayfield in 2020, like he was just connecting with everybody with the Browns. He
Yeah.
may be doing that again with the Bucks.
And that's why you hope that Jalen McMillan, comes out swinging as that wide receiver 3 and it kind of hits the ground running right away. And Bucky Irving can be impactful and Kate Otten can take a step forward, because it's one thing to have the 1-2 punch with Mike and Chris, and that's obviously going to be most important. But there's a difference between just having options and knowing you have a legitimate third target, right? Like every team has a third
Yeah.
and fourth and fifth option, but I want Kate Otten to turn into a legit target this year, and not just a, hey, he's around. I want Jalen McMillan to be a legit target, a guy that, maybe doesn't, I want him to like be on the graphic when it's like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin facing
Yeah.
the Saints defense. Like I want Jalen McMillan on that graphic when ESPN or NBC or Fox or whoever is is promoting this game. So, and McMillan's going to get those opportunities early because you're going to say, all right, rookie, let's see what you can do. So he will get one-on-one matchups. Will he win them? That remains to be seen. But there is a great chance for whether it's Jalen McMillan or Bucky Irving to make an impact right away, which is very difficult to do really on any team and any offense in the league, but especially for like Marvin Harrison is going to get a ton of targets because the Cardinals don't
Yeah.
have other wide receivers. Jalen McMillan does not have that luxury. Now, maybe that'll help him in the long run because he can kind of focus on different things without having all the pressure. But, if this is fantasy football, I'm probably taking Marvin Harrison Jr. before I take Jalen McMillan. No, Jalen McMillan could be a very nice sleeper in a later round this year.
Yeah, and you mentioned like all those guys, like 5, 6 weapons. Not even Trey Palmer. Like Trey Palmer
Yeah,
can be
yeah,
a deep
exactly.
threat and somebody that can create a lot of instant offense, kind of like Bucky Irvin, just kind of being that change of pace, offering a dynamic none of the other wide receivers have. And so with all those weapons, I mean, this really just kind of connects everything that we've said back to Baker Mayfield probably having the best supporting cast.
Yeah, I would say so. If I was building a super team of like Baker Mayfield former teammates, I think you got to go Bucks wide receivers,
Browns running backs.
Browns running backs. The offensive line is tough. I mean, it is. He had Baker's best receivers are right now, but I think everything else is kind of pretty much the Browns.
Yeah,
Like,
just
if
put
we-
Tristan
'cause-
Wirfs in there.
Right. Yeah. Because if we're taking the whole offensive line, we can only go by what Baker had last year in Tampa Bay versus what he had with the Browns. So skill position wise, it's mostly just wide receiver for the Bucks, kind of Browns, everything else. Maybe you want to
Yeah.
mix in the Rams in there. But anyway, we got a $4.99 super chat from Justin. Thank you very much, Justin, for this $4.99 super chat.
Thanks,
Remember, we got a lot of comments and stuff, so we can't get to every single one. But if you super chat us, we make sure we get to it ASAP. Justin says, should I stick with the Bucs? I feel like the 2020 NFC Championship game against the Packers, I feel like we lost. And can you give me an honest answer? Well, I mean, should you stick with the Bucs? Yeah, absolutely. They're in a pretty good spot. They just re-signed Baker. They just re-signed Mike. They have a young core on defense. I mean, yeah, Lavonte David's been in the league for a very long time, but
Yeah.
Antoine Winfield Jr. is just hitting in his prime and was an all-pro safety. Yaya Diaby and Kalijah Cansey, the 1-2 punch there, could make the defensive line great for quite a while. I think, and remember, the Bucs have the longest consecutive streak of making the playoffs. So I think you should definitely stick with the Bucs. As far as the 2020 NFC Championship game, I know where you're coming from because the Bucs jumped out to a huge lead and the Packers came back and then
Yeah.
stupidly, is it Mike or Matt LaFleur that was the coach? Or is
Matt LaFleur.
Matt LaFleur. Mike LaFleur was the offensive coordinator for the Jets a couple years ago. Matt LaFleur stupidly deciding to kick a field goal instead of going for the win on 4th and goal was
Pains
kind
my
of a
soul.
crazy move. So did the Bucs kind of get bailed out with that? A little bit, but you also have to remember if Rodgers and the Packers score there, the Bucs are still going to have a good amount of time with at least a timeout or two left to go down, and I think they would have just needed to kick a field goal to tie it up. So either the Bucs defense gets the stop, or the Packers score, but then the Bucs can go and try to tie it up or take the lead. So
Yeah.
it was a stupid decision by LaFleur, especially with having all the timeouts and everything. And it was kind of silly to be like, we're going to put the ball in Tom Brady's hands and hopefully we stop him. And the Bucs were able to get a first down and run out the clock for the rest of the game. But I wouldn't say that you should feel like the Bucs lost, because then they went out and dismantled the Chiefs in the Super Bowl. It's very, very difficult to win a football game, especially in the postseason. So you shouldn't feel sorry for the Packers making a dumb decision, because the Bucs are Super Bowl champs, and they've made the playoffs ever since. So yeah, I wouldn't jump ship on the Bucs.
And then the next game is so much more convincing against the Chiefs. It was a Todd Bowles masterclass in the Super Bowl. And just kind of answering the question, you definitely should stick with the Bucs. I mean, it's a team that, like, you mentioned all the talent that they have, but also just such a stable front office that you can rely on to make really good moves and not bad decisions. And I think that really speaks volumes in how they were able to navigate post Tom Brady to still being a playoff team. I think that says a lot, and kind of looking towards the future with all the players being locked up. There's a lot to like for the Buccaneers heading into the upcoming seasons. Matt, I did want to get to before the end of the show, going back to roll call. A couple of the roll call.
Let's do it up. Yeah.
So we got Richard Soroka. Hey, Richard, watching from Honolulu, Hawaii on vacation.
Awesome.
Hope you're enjoying your vacation. Hammy from Apollo Beach. Klatzig from Dublin, Ireland. Guten Abend zu Tobias Stark, Bucks, Germany. Munchin is in the house. And Jeremy Corp, Syracuse, New York. Free Sean Tucker.
All right, got a Sean Tucker fan in the building.
Yeah.
Good to have his support. Yeah, I appreciate everybody for roll call once again. Great turnout. Justin followed that up with, well, I love the Bucs, and then I just want to know what to expect. I would expect a team that is going to be hovering around 10 wins this year. I would expect a team that should make the playoffs. I'm not going to say win the division, but I think should reach the postseason. So that's what I would expect for the Buccaneers this year. Now, when you are buying a home, you should be expecting the best. And there is no better person to work with than Eric Gross and the Eric Gross Realty Group, the official realty group of PewterReport.com. It takes a full team effort to win a football game, and it takes a full team effort to win in real estate. The Eric Gross Group has done hundreds of transactions in this crazy real estate market and has the experience in all types of situations. With their strong team of vendors and a network of over 85,000 agents, the Eric Gross Group will turn your dream of buying or selling a home into a reality. Their clients are not just transactions, they are lifelong friendships. So don't let the stress of buying or selling a home keep you out of the game. You can find Eric Gross and the Eric Gross Group on Facebook and Instagram at Eric Gross Group. Check out their website at housesandfla.com or give them a call at 513-907-4271. That's 513-907-4271. No matter where you are in your home ownership journey, you'll feel welcome with the Eric Gross Group, the official realty group of PewterReport.com. By the way, on tomorrow's show, we will be making bold predictions about the Bucs for the 2024 season. See how many of them come true. Maybe we'll, try to remember them, and then when the season gets done, we'll be like, oh, hey, you went 2 for 10 or 4 for 5 or whatever it may be. So we're going to make some bold predictions on the Buccaneers for tomorrow. And, of course, if you're not already doing so, please follow us on all of our social media on X, Instagram, Facebook. We are at Pewter Report, and our YouTube channel is Pewter Report TV, where we got tons of content and the podcast 4 times a week. A little scheduling note on that. It is the 4th of July weekend coming up on, obviously, Thursday is the 4th of July. So we're only doing 3 shows this week, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. And then, obviously, the 4th of July is on the 4th. So that's going to do it for us on today's show. Quick shout out. Happy birthday to my dad. Very happy birthday to you. And appreciate all the Pewter people on today's show. That's going to do it for us. So for Adam Slavon, I'm Matt Matera saying thanks everybody for watching. We will see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. for another edition of the Pewter Report podcast. Out.